Hi guys, and welcome to another video. Well, it's that weird time between Christmas and New Year, but I'm good because I've got my drink here. Now, I was hoping to get this video out before Christmas, but to be honest, I was being a little bit lazy and having a little bit of time off, having a bit of a rest, and I really just didn't get round to it. But anyway, I'm thinking, really, Space Invaders Christmas wish list, it makes more sense to think of it as Space Invaders 2025 wish list, the things that I hope will be added to Unraid during 2025. So I think what we'll do in this video is we'll look at what I asked for last year and then see which things have been actually added in. And as the Unraid 7 RCs have been out for a while, currently we're on RC2, I think we'll have a look at RC2 and go through that, and I'll give my thoughts on what I think would be really cool if it was added to Unraid 7. And I'd really appreciate it, guys, if you say what you think would be really cool, and if you think that my ideas are great, give this video a thumbs up. If you think they're really bad, give this video a thumbs down. Anyway, give your opinions in the comments below, and I'm going to take a little bit more of my drink. We'll go in the other room, and then we'll get started. Okay, so I'm going to start here on my main server, Base Star. And I think before we actually do anything, what I want to show everyone and remind you guys is when we reboot nowadays, the reboot system is just so much better. We get all of these little bits of information that we never used to get before. So before starting, I just thought I'd just mention this because obviously it's hard to mention it whilst actually recording the video and going through the features. So I think this is really cool, and this is something extra we didn't have last year. Okay, so the server's booted back up, and like I was saying earlier, I'm currently using Unraid 7 RC2. Now, the very first new feature that I want to mention, this isn't something I personally need, but it's a feature that my friend and Patreon Marcus, and many others like him, would really greatly benefit from. Now, sadly, Marcus recently lost a lot of his sight, but he continues to impress me with his ability to manage complex things like running his own server using a screen reader. He uses a tool called JAWS, which for those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically a program that reads text aloud on the screen, so it enables people who are visually impaired to be able to interact with their computers. Now, I really think it's amazing what he achieves with a screen reader. Honestly, I couldn't imagine using a computer without being able to see. And Marcus not only manages doing this, but he thrives at doing it. He's got a complex server setup with loads of containers. It's really amazing what he does. And it's really a testament to his skills and determination. But like many others in his situation, Marcus has pointed out areas where Unraid's GUI could support screen readers better. And this is something I really feel strongly about advocating for. Improving accessibility for screen readers isn't just about adding convenience, it's basically about opening doors for people to work, create, and enjoy their servers on an equal footing. Okay, so that's the first thing on my wish list that I'd love Unraid to have in 2025, is for Unraid OS to have improved screen reader support. Right, okay, so moving on. Let's go across onto the dashboard. Okay, so here we are on the dashboard. Now, the first thing I want to say is last year I was hoping for a clock, and we've actually got one here, so that's really awesome. Now, it's really useful having a clock because if your Unraid server's set to the wrong time, it can actually cause various problems. Not only things in the logs, you won't be able to tell when they actually happened, but also when you're running a container, something like Vault Warden or Bitwarden, and you use it for 2FA, well, 2FA codes are kind of time-based, and so it messes everything up. So that's always something to look out for if you ever find your 2FA doesn't work when the clocks change from daylight savings. Always make sure that your computer's got the right time, because when 2FA stops working, that can be a cause of why that happens. Now, we've got some other tiles here that we didn't have. You can see here, we've got this one, virtual machines usage, but there's no virtual machine started, so let's go and start one up. And here we can see here the virtual machines that are running, and here the virtual machine usage. Now, what I'd quite like to see, to be honest, is to have this actually combined into one widget. So maybe have the VM running here, and then to the right hand side of it in this blank space, have the guest CPU usage, the host CPU usage, and these other metrics. But I think this is really cool that we can actually see this on the dashboard. That's a really good improvement. Now, with the amount of improvements that have come to the dashboard over the last 12 to 18 months, there's really not a lot I could actually want to actually change here. I really like it here, how the memory is now shown. This is much more intuitive to see what's going on. That's really, really cool. You know, just remember how it used to look like this with the bars. I think it's just really, really improved. Much better look. A great job there by the Lime Tech devs. Now, there's one thing that I'm really waiting for, and I know lots of you guys out there feel exactly the same way. I'd really love to see the web GUI be much more mobile responsive. So when we look at it with our cell phones and tablets, it scales much better, so it's easier to use. Now, just one other thing about the dashboard is when we click this little lock here, and we can turn off various tiles. So if I turn off these like this, what I'd really like to be able to see is when we got our dashboard how we like it, to have the option to be able to save this in like a config or INI file on the server itself. Then that way, if we opened up the web GUI in a different browser, it's going to look the same. Because currently now, if I was to open this in, say, Brave, we can see here that the things that I wanted to hide, they're still here in another browser. So I'd like to be able to see that if we disable some tiles, then that's actually stored in a config file that's local to the server. Because as well, I'm one of those weird people that love to make my life difficult. I have my browser as well actually delete cookies every time it closes because I've got some weird obsession with privacy. So yeah, so consistent things showing on the dashboard across multiple devices, that's made it to my Unraid feature wish list. Okay, so moving on from the main dashboard, it's still something I'd really like. Very, very minor thing. I'd love to be able to click on the actual release here. And when the release notes pops up, on the release notes somewhere, we have a button that takes us to check for updates. Yeah, this is really super minor, but for me, I think it just makes it a little easier. Same amount of clicks as the normal way, but being able to check for updates from here as well just means I can do it from any page. Now, talking about Update OS, wow, this has improved so much. This is such a big improvement over how the update system used to be. Now you might be thinking, come on Space Invader, you're not meant to be talking about what you like, you're meant to be talking about features that you want to have in Unraid. So, with that in mind, let's go across to the main tab. Now, the next feature that I'd really like to have is quite difficult to actually show, I guess. Now, if I start scrolling down here, you see here at the bottom, there's a little arrow. So at the bottom of the web page, we can click on here and it goes back up to the top. Now, I'd really like to see maybe on this side, to have one that goes down to the bottom. Now you might think that's strange. Well, when you're not on a tabbed view in Unraid and you've got the view set how I have, going down to the bottom here to the stop and start array options and buttons to reboot and shut down your server, etc. Well, for most of us, it's not too bad. But let me show you why for some people this can be a bit awkward. Servers that have got multiple pools, large Z pools, or large arrays, well, it can take a while to scroll down to the bottom. So having a shortcut button to get there, I think would be pretty cool. So then we'd just better click on it, and we could stop the array, reboot the server, shut it down, or start mover. Just a much easier way, because we've got the button to go to the top. It'd be cool to have one to go to the bottom. Now, another thing I think would be good for large pools is to actually have a button to be able to collapse the pool and a button to expand it. So just on the pool you'd click it and it would collapse, click it again it would expand. Just really a bit like how we've got the hide and show datasets button on ZFS Master. Well, if we could do that to all of the pools, I think it would make it a bit easier to navigate the web GUI for people who've got servers with a whole bunch of disks. Now, even if we could do that, I would still want the down button. There's another reason I'd want that. So for instance, if I click on disk 2 here, this is where I've got some of my movies. I'm going to click onto here. So if at the top here, I wanted to delete, say, the first 5 here, and maybe a couple more further down. Now, yes, I could just right click each one and delete each one individually, but really, that's defeating the object of having these tick boxes. So, at the moment, I have to scroll right down to the bottom, and this takes ages if you've got a whole bunch of files. Yep, I can click on the side here and drag right down to the bottom, and then the file manager buttons are visible, and I could click delete, copy, or do whatever I want to do. But being able to have a scroll to the bottom of the page button, as well as a scroll to the top button, I think would be useful for this as well. Right, so going back to the main tab. Now, you knew it was coming. Another thing we all really want to have is multiple Unraid arrays. That would be really cool. So we can have 2 arrays that we can actually add files to and grow our Unraid server that way. So I can have one for precious data where I have my newer disks, and one with a bunch of old disks for data I don't care about so much. I'm sure there's a million different reasons we might want multiple Unraid arrays. So if you had multiple arrays in your server, I'd love to know what you'd actually use them for. Please share it in the comments of this video and let us, the community, know what you'd be using it for. Okay, next new feature I'd love to see on the main tab. Now I'm going to click my fake down button here to bring us to the bottom. So I always find when mover runs, especially if I hit it manually, I never really know how much longer it's going to take. So what I'd love to be able to see is when we click mover, some sort of progress bar or indicator for how long it's going to be before it's finished. I think that would be a really awesome feature, and that's something I hope that we'll see in 2025. Okay, another feature that I'd really like to see is on the main tab again, is when we scroll down and we do a parity check. Now, obviously, this would be an automatic parity check or a manual parity check. What I'd like to be able to do is to be able to choose how fast the parity check actually takes. Now, I don't mean I wish it would take an hour, although, yeah, that would be really cool. But I mean things in the realms of reality. What I really wish we could do is actually throttle the parity check. Now, we can have it do chunks and just do parity checking in times when we're not using the server very much. But what I'd really like to be able to do is, at the moment we can see here that my parity check's at 255 megs per second. I'd like to be able to throttle that to 50%. So that way the parity check can just chug away, but it's not going to use quite so much I/O on my server if I don't want to. So it'd be really nice to have some kind of option to be able to throttle the parity check. Let me know if you think that would be a useful thing for you as well. Now, another thing in a similar vein, but to look at this feature, let's go across to my other server here, Battlestar. Now, this server doesn't have an Unraid array. It's just got 3 Z pools, these 2 RAID Z1 ones here, and just a single disk Z pool. Now, obviously, if we scroll down to the bottom, we're not going to see any parity sync buttons because there's no Unraid array. So I think on servers like this, it would be nice to have a button here that we can manually trigger a scrub on all of the pools in the server, just like we would a parity sync on a standard Unraid server. I think that would be useful. It saves us then having to come inside and clicking on scrub onto each pool. Having a button which will just do all of them at once, I think that would be useful. Guess there's no reason why we couldn't have that on any server that has a Z pool. This one does too. So we could always just have another button at the bottom of the page. Yeah, obviously, we'd rename this as Array and Pool Operation. So, I don't know. Now, not the biggest feature in the world, more of a quality of life enhancement, but still worth considering nevertheless, I think. Okay, so the next thing on my feature wish list is about the Unraid array again. Now, the array, in my opinion, is one of the things that makes Unraid really great and stands out head and shoulders above other OSs. I love how we can add drives of any size at any time and then immediately increase our storage capacity. So for example, say we started with 6 drives, all of them 4 terabytes, one of them was parity and 5 data. So we'd have 20 terabytes of usable space. Now later we might start filling that up, so we decide we're going to upgrade the drives. We pop in another 20 for parity and 120 replacing that first data drive. So now we'd have 36 terabytes of free space. And a bit further down the road, we swap out, say, disk 2 for another 20 terabyte, giving us now 52 terabytes of usable space. So a nice upgrade and much more usable space than we actually currently need. But then we think to ourselves, right, those 4 terabyte drives, we don't really need them anymore. They're pretty old. They were old when we put them in the server. So because they're old and we don't really need them because we've got the large capacity with the other drives now, it would be nice if we could actually remove them from the array, and doing that without breaking parity. Now we can actually do that manually, but to be honest it's quite a process. What we have to do is move all the data off the drive we want to remove. We then write zeros through every sector, and by doing that, when we remove the drive, it doesn't break parity. So yeah, it's doable, but it's not really beginner friendly. Now what I'd love to see in Unraid is to have a feature built into the GUI where we can pretty much just as easily remove a drive to Unraid as we can add a drive. So that would be something I think would be pretty cool. Okay, so while we're still on the main tab here, showing all of the disks, on my server I like to have my array encrypted. So the next thing on my feature wish list, I know it's a really big lift. And my grandmother always used to say, those who ask don't get, but those who don't ask don't want. So today I'm going to be asking for it anyway, and I know it's something big, but it would be really cool to have it in Unraid. So right now, Unraid supports disk encryption on any drive in our server. But if you already have drives in your server that aren't encrypted, you can't just flip a switch and encrypt them. It's a pretty involved process. What you have to do is copy the data off that drive and then reformat it and then copy everything back. So I think for a lot of us that's a real headache. It's pretty time consuming, so we decide not to do it. But wouldn't it be cool if Unraid had a built-in function to handle this for us? Let's say we've got enough free space elsewhere on the array, Unraid could temporarily move our data off the drive, put it elsewhere on the server, reformat that empty disk so it's encrypted, after which then move the data back. So, what do you guys think about it? Is that a feature you'd actually use? In fact, are any of the features that I mentioned in this video something you'd like to use? Tell me which ones you like, which ones you think are awful, and any you think I should have mentioned in this video. Okay, so for the next feature, we're staying on the main tab, but we're going to go across to another server. Now, this server here, it only uses Z-pools. And so a feature I'd love to see for ZFS in 2025 would be the ability to do RAID Z expansion, adding an extra drive. Being able to have that ability to do that, I think that'll be a feature many of us would really like to see. Okay, so let's go back to my main server here. And the final thing I'm going to look at, I think, on the main page, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to look at the flash drive. So why the flash drive, do you say? Well, what I really would like to see in 2025 is to actually not have to have a flash drive at all. That we could use a different boot device, something like an SSD, and boot Unraid off that. Okay, so let's move on and leave the main tab now. Wow, this video, I think it's been over 15 minutes so far. So let's go on to the shares tab. Now, to be honest, there's not really a lot here that I'd like to see. There's one thing that I'd like to be able to do. For instance, to take a share, it'd be really nice if on the security for a share, when we set it to private, currently we can set there as user access. But what I'd really like to see is if Unraid, and I'm going to go to the settings tab here now, and to users, what I'd really like to see is, as well as having individual users, I'd love to be able to add users to groups, and then on the share permissions, be able to add a group to the permissions, not just users. For me, I think that would be really cool. Okay, so nothing else here that I'm going to mention. So now onto the settings tab here. Here, there's nothing really that I think needs to be improved. But I will be coming back to the Docker settings in a moment when we look at the Docker tab. So now let's move on to plugins here. Okay, so on the plugins page, there's nothing really I think needs improving. Let me know, guys, if there's anything here you think would make the plugins tab better. Let us know in the comments of this video, guys, if you think there's anything that would make this tab better. So let's move on to the Docker tab now. Okay, so on the Docker tab, there's one thing that I'd really like to have. Now, this might not be so important for people who maybe only have one server, but I think it is important really for everyone. So in my home lab, I've got multiple Unraid servers and I run Docker on pretty much all of them. So on some servers, I may have installed a container and I can't actually remember which server I installed that container on. So what I'd love to be able to do is have a search function at the top just like we do in community applications when we're searching for something. So if I search for, say, MB here and click enter, then it's going to filter out everything and just show me that container. That would be so useful for me. I think it would be really, really cool. And obviously clearing the search field, we get to see all of our containers again as normal. And to be honest, really, if it's going to be integrated in the Docker tab, why also not put it in the plugins tab and also possibly the VMs tab as well? I think it would just make it really easy to find the thing we're looking for those of us who are running servers with lots of plugins, lots of containers or lots of VMs. What do you guys think? Okay, for the next thing on my list, again to do with Docker, I'd really like with a container to be able to, if we want to allow it to bind to more than one network. So at the moment we can just choose one network, but I'd really like to be able to see it that we could actually click add and be able to add a second network to the container. Now you might think, well, why would you want to do that? Well, one example would be, say, a CCTV container. You access that through your normal IP address, accessing it through the web UI, but your cameras, they might all be on another VLAN. So then you can put the CCTV cameras into the container without having to have it on your main network. Makes it much more secure. Same goes for IoT things. I just think it'd be a useful feature to be able to have more than one network assigned to a container. And now, talking about network types, you can see here I've got a custom Docker network here. Now normally to create that, we do that from command line, just type in Docker network create and then the name of the network we want, and then we get to see that network available in our server. But what I'd really like to see is if we went over to settings here and onto the Docker settings, that if we toggle to advanced view, we could have the option to create a custom Docker network here through the GUI. I think that would be really useful, especially for people who are new to Unraid. Much easier and less daunting than having to open terminal. Okay, so let's move on now from the Docker tab to the VM tab. Now, there's not really very much for me to say here, except wow, there's been so many improvements in the last 12 months here. I'm sure all of you know, we've got things now like we can clone VMs, we can snapshot them, all cool things like that. And if I edit this VM here, there are so many more VM options than we used to have. And one thing I like is we can create our own templates. So if I click on Create Modify Template here, I can make a custom template that I can use, that I can base off to create new VMs. And scrolling down to the bottom here, and now clicking on Add New VM, we can see the template that I created there. But what I'd love to be able to do is actually be able to export this template and send it to someone to have a look at or to install on their server, and also the ability to import templates that have been user created for maybe certain types of VMs that are not standard here. So that would be a pretty cool feature. Now something pretty minor. I think it'd be pretty cool if when we select a graphics card, that if we select a primary GPU that can't be passed through, or at least can't be passed through without a VBIOS, we just get a little warning telling us and we might need to pass through, say, a VBIOS, etc. I think that will help new users. But really, other than that, I can't really think of anything else to be added into VMs. So I'm going to leave it there for VMs and now go across to the Apps tab. Now, nothing really much I would change here except maybe one little feature to be added. Say I search for Plex, for example, and I'm a new user. It can be quite confusing knowing which actual container to install. And if I scroll down here, I'm having to go on to, say, the second page to be able to see the official Plex media server from Plex themselves. So what I think would be really cool is to have maybe a button here where we can toggle it saying show official only. So when we do a search, for new users they can toggle that and it might be more easy for them to choose which container they should install. Anyway, so going on to the Tools tab here now, one thing I'd like to see here is maybe in ZFS we could set the ARC cache size. That'd be nice to see. I'm not sure whether it would be here in the tool or maybe across here in settings, but some sort of ability to, in the GUI, be able to adjust the ARC cache size for ZFS. That would be really good. And to be honest, I think this brings me to the end of my wish list. Now, I'm sure I'll read through your comments and think, oh yeah, I was going to say that, and I've forgotten a whole load of things that I was going to add. But anyway, I think the video's long enough now, and I really hope you enjoyed looking at what I think would be cool in Unraid. Now, please let's discuss this in the comments below. Let me know all of the features you'd love to see in Unraid in 2025. But also, please say what you found the best features that have been added in the last 12 months. Anyway guys, it's time for me to go now. Now if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always I want to give a really big thank you to all of my Patreons and supporters out there. Thank you so much guys for all of your support, I really appreciate it. Anyway guys, it's getting late here and it's time for me to go, but whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I'll catch you in the next video.